Hey everybody, welcome back to the World Cup update. So in this episode, we're going to switch things up just a little bit, and this is going to be a bit more of a country focus. We're going to talk about all of the countries that just won that playoff game that happened on March 31st. So in case you missed it, here is a very brief recap. Italy, for the third time in a row, missed the World Cup. They lost their match versus Bosnia and Herzegovina. And then we also saw Czechia make it through to the World Cup, winning on penalties. Then we had a chippy nail-biter between Turkey and Kosovo, where Turkey prevailed. There was also a high-scoring match between Poland and Sweden, which Sweden triumphed in. Iraq beat Bolivia in a low-scoring affair. And the Democratic Republic of the Congo beat Jamaica 1-0 to also make the tournament. So let's talk a little bit about the potential inbound international demand that we may see from travelers from these countries. And then also, too, we can put the microscope on some of these individual game dates, because some of them, even though the opponent was undecided last week, were still some of the top performers for their respective host cities. So first of all, Sweden beating Poland. Really, the only knock against Sweden is their population's about 10 million. So it's a good-sized country, but again, Poland's population would have been much, much bigger. But for Sweden, it's very easy to travel really to any of the North American countries. They have a very strong passport. So this overall, it would have been good either way had we got Sweden or Poland. But Sweden, congratulations to them. I do think that they will have a very positive impact for us. They're FIFA ranked 38 right now as far as the ELO rankings go. And here's a quick look at some of the matches that Sweden will be involved in. They're playing in Monterrey, Houston, and Dallas. And if we hover over the Monterrey game versus Tunisia, you can see that this one has been dropping quite a bit versus both 200 days out and versus the peak. The Netherlands game here in Houston, right now, all of the Houston matches are looking really good as far as pricing growth for just the game nights themselves. This is a game that is showing a lot of promise. We've seen about 64% rate growth versus 200 days out. And then the game versus Japan in Dallas, this one has been, from a demand and pricing perspective, one of the strongest Dallas games, even before Sweden was decided. So really good growth here in Dallas. We're about 21% higher in pricing than we were 200 days out from kickoff. So this is going to be one of the stronger games in for sure. Let's now move to our second qualifying country, which is Czechia. They beat Denmark on penalties to get through to the World Cup. And this is another kind of medium-sized country here with, close to 11 million in population. Relatively affluent, and their FIFA ranking is also kind of similar to Sweden. So this is a country that I've kind of tagged as being moderate, high inbound international demand. If we look at things like their ease of travel to North America, it's somewhat similar to Sweden in that it's going to be pretty easier for Czech travelers to come to North America. Their currency, they're not part of the Eurozone, so they do have their, Czech koruna currency, which moderate exchange. It's not really prohibitive for them to come to North America. So I do think that we will see a pretty good impact from Czech travelers. Now, games that they are playing in, we've got versus South Korea, versus South Africa, and versus Mexico and Mexico City. All of these games are showing very high lighthouse demand indexes. And as I hover over each of these different games, you can see the rate evolution for each of Czechia's games. Now, the South Korea game in Guadalajara is off of its peak a little bit. It's still up versus 200 days out from kickoff, but still we're losing a little bit of pricing power there in Guadalajara for that particular game. But you can see overnight it looks like rates did come up a little bit, so I wouldn't be surprised to see rates bounce a little bit. For South Africa, this game has been pretty steady. We're only about 5.6% off of our all-time peak, but very good growth versus that 200-day out mark. And then versus Mexico, this is going to be a strong game, even though it happens on a Wednesday. All three of those Mexico City games are very, very strong. Okay, next up, we get to our third country, which is Turkey. Now, Turkey has a massive population, 85 plus million people in Turkey. Their FIFA ranking is a little bit stronger than both Sweden and Czechia. They're currently ranked number 20 2022 in the world. And here we start to get into a little bit more uncertainty as to what the international inbound effect is going to be. The population of Turkey is massive, so I think overall there's going to be a pretty strong positive impact from Turkey making the World Cup. I certainly think that Turkey making the World Cup over Kosovo, at least from an international inbound demand perspective, I think is a little bit stronger outcome, simply based on the fact that Turkey is, 70 times bigger than Kosovo in population. And if we look at some of the question marks, though, it is going to be a little bit tougher for Turkish football fans to travel to the United States. Also, that currency exchange is quite prohibitive between the Turkish lira and the US dollar or the Canadian dollar. But again, I think that the population is going to be able to overcome some of that. I think there's going to be enough wealthy Turkish football fans to create a noticeable impact for some of these games. So as we look out across the 3 group stage games that Turkey is going to be playing in, we have versus Australia. That's a very high lighthouse demand index, but we're pretty far off of our all-time pricing peaks there in Vancouver, but we're still at $1,200 for this particular game night. So that's a night where pricing is very, very high, but has been trending down. In San Francisco, we've got versus Paraguay. And same thing here for this game, Paraguay versus Turkey. We are off of our 200-day out and our peak pricing quite a bit. So this is one to watch that's trending down in pricing. And then here, a little bit more kind of flat to neutral, the Los Angeles game. This is Turkey versus the US. I think that this game is going to be plenty strong for the Los Angeles market because you've got the US playing. All right, and let's get to our other 3 countries here. So Bosnia and Herzegovina. Here, we're getting into some of the countries that I think are going to have a little bit smaller of an inbound impact for their games. It's not a knock on these countries at all. We're wishing them success in the tournament, and I hope that they do very well. But for these countries, there's going to be some headwinds as far as what kind of demand impacts you can expect from them as a hotelier. So let's talk about why. For Bosnia and Herzegovina, the population is only about 3 million people. Also, too, you've got some visa requirements into the United States and Canada. So the Bosnian mark, they're also not part of the Eurozone. So they've got, some currency exchange considerations to consider. Looking at their games here, they're playing in Toronto, LA, and Seattle. They all have at least moderate to elevated lighthouse demand indexes here. These are still going to be noticeably strong nights, especially if you're looking at versus same time last year as a comparison. But looking at the Toronto game here versus Canada, really the big boost for this game, I think, is just the fact that it's a Canada home game. So I think a lot of Canadians are going to come out for that game. So if I'm a Toronto hotelier, I still think this is going to be a very strong night. Then in LA, we have Bosnia versus Switzerland. Here, this might be a little bit of a softer demand game, I think, because of the population factor. Both Bosnia and Switzerland, in the grand scheme of things, are a little bit smaller population than some of the, massive countries like Turkey or Brazil or something like that. So this is one, if I'm an LA hotelier, I would watch this one very closely for potential for it to underperform a bit. You've also got the weekday effect. This game is happening on a Thursday, so I would keep an eye out for that one. And then the exact same situation here for Seattle. So when Bosnia plays Qatar here on Wednesday, June 24th, I would certainly keep an eye out for this one to potentially be a little bit softer than what you may be hoping for, because you've got smaller population countries that are playing on a weekday night, which from what we saw in the last episode can sometimes be a little bit of a headwind. Then let's get to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Democratic Republic of the Congo has a massive population of over 100 million, but it's going to be difficult for even the most diehard fans from the Democratic Republic of the Congo to make it out to the World Cup. There's really stringent visa requirements for all 3 North American countries. The diaspora in North America is relatively small, so there's not a whole lot of built-in fan base from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and it would require lots of connecting flights to get to most of the host cities of the World Cup. So this, I think, is going to be one of the countries that has one of the smallest international inbound demand effects, along with other countries like Haiti and Iran. So looking at the different games, though, some good news is the Portugal game and the Colombia game, if you're a Houston hotelier, this game is still lights out as far as pricing evolution goes. So we're still seeing very strong pricing growth from this Portugal game. And that is because we're going to see Ronaldo, right? This, I think, is a game that's really driven by star power. And then we have Colombia. So this is Democratic Republic of Congo versus Colombia. That's happening Tuesday, June 23rd in Guadalajara. This is another extreme demand night. And Colombia, that's convenient for Colombians to travel to. And just kind of based on the current FIFA rankings, it looks like it might be a game where Colombia has a really strong chance to win versus the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And then here's one that I'll flag as a potential underperformer. Now, Atlanta's game schedule is very hot and cold. They have some really strong games, and then they have some games that I think are at risk of being underperformers. This, unfortunately, is one of them. So here's why. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, for all of the reasons I just mentioned, I think is going to be a little bit of a softer inbound travel country. And then you've got Uzbekistan, which I believe is making their first World Cup appearance ever. DRC, this is only their second World Cup ever. And even though that game is on a Saturday night, at this point in the tournament, with that being the third round, there's a very strong likelihood that both Uzbekistan and the Democratic Republic of the Congo could be out of the tournament at this point, both completely eliminated. And these are two countries where it's going to be very tricky for their travelers to come to the United States right now. And then finally, we have Iraq. Iraq has a very large population, but a lot of other headwinds. So currency exchange, very unfavorable. Visa requirements, very, very unfavorable, especially for the United States. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that kind of inbound tourism, but there's actually a pretty big Iraqi diaspora in the United States and in North America in general. So you could see some stadium filling effects from that, but I really wouldn't expect big international travelers from Iraq coming over for the World Cup. Now, looking at the different games that Iraq is going to be playing in, you've got versus Norway. This game is coming off of its peak quite a bit. So right now, pricing in Boston for this night is at about $632 versus a peak of $829. In Philly, somewhat similar story. Prices are still definitely noticeably elevated, but versus your peak, which was 200 days out, we're about 11.3% off of that high pricing that we saw. And then this third match here, Iraq versus Senegal. This game, I'm a little on the fence about. It could be a bit of an underperformer, but there's some really good things going for it as well. Senegal is currently ranked number 14 in the FIFA ELO rankings, so they're actually doing really well right now. So they're actually kind of a team to watch. So I don't think Senegal is really a negative for that matchup at all. But I would just keep an eye on it because I think Iraq is going to be a little bit of a smaller impact country for the World Cup. So I would watch this one, and you can notice too that the Lighthouse Demand Index is noticeably a little bit softer for this game than it is versus the Norway and France game. And I think that has to do with an ease of travel for Iraqis coming to North America and for Senegalese people coming to North America as well. So it's still going to be a great game. It's still going to be great for the Toronto market. I just don't think it's going to be quite as strong as some other matchups maybe. So that's a look at the 6 countries that have now been decided for the World Cup. We now no longer have any undecideds in the World Cup, which is super exciting. So at this point, this is a great time to go in and custom tailor each strategy for each game based on your demand index and based on the opponent. You basically got no excuse at this point. You now know exactly every single country who's playing in the World Cup. So it's time to get that taken care of if you have not done so already. So that's it for this World Cup update. I'm going to stop it here and we'll be back next week, next Thursday, for an additional update on the World Cup. Thanks for watching.